Support for living and learning with disabilities comes from Living Innovations, providing support for people with developmental disabilities to have a good life at home and in the community. Services include Community Connections, which facilitates employment, skill development, and community integration to maximize each individual's well-being and independence. For more information or to learn about job opportunities for compassionate people wishing to do meaningful work, visit livinginnovations.com. And by the Natural Care Wellness Center that has been serving the New Hampshire and Maine seacoast for 23 years. Our goal is to encourage a healthy lifestyle through education, wellness choices, and hands-on healing. Natural Care Wellness Center offers gentle force chiropractic, family and child wellness, chiropractic acupuncture, holistic nutrition, nutrition response testing, a decompression table, therapeutic exercise, whole food supplements, neuro-emotional techniques, and massage therapy.
Welcome to Chloe's Shred Shed. I started this small business because I love shredding. I am proud to provide a valuable service in my local community. Being an entrepreneur made it possible for me to keep working during the pandemic. I like working and having a purpose.
Owen is an avid naturalist and aspiring entomologist, which is the study of insects, and has participated in multiple citizen science projects and volunteer opportunities with organizations such as the New Hampshire Fish and Game, Trout Unlimited, and the Harris Center for Conservation Education. He obtained a bachelor's in biology, art, and the environment from Unity College in Maine. Owen is also a recent graduate of the New Hampshire Leadership Series class of 2023, and he has a strong desire to make the conservation science field more accessible to those with disabilities and neurodivergent individuals. He currently works at UNH, but he is underemployed and lives in Dover. Today, he will have a chance to tell us about some of the projects he's been working on. Sandra Sonicson is a retired fishery biologist. She worked for a little more than 20 years with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. She now volunteers with the New Hampshire Fish and Game and Trout Unlimited. She's particularly useful to them because she can easily identify the aquatic invertebrates, animals that lack vertebral columns or backbones that are used as indicators of water quality. Today she will share some of the projects she's working on and her connection working with Owen.
Sometimes we miss all those wonderful qualities that we just listed in that last song, because we decide who people are before we even get to know them, based on maybe what they look like, how they talk, what kind of clothes they're wearing, what kind of music they like, whatever. We decide who they are before we ever get to know who they really are inside. And it happens to us too. Sometimes people decide who we are before they know us. I think all we really want is just for people to see us for who we really are. See me beautiful, look for the best in me. It's what I really am, and all I wanna be. It may take some time, it may be hard to find, but see me beautiful. See me beautiful, each and every day. Could you take a chance? Could you find a way to see me shining through in everything I do and see me beautiful? See me beautiful, look for the best in me. It's what I really am, and all I wanna be. It may take some time, it may be hard to find, but see me beautiful. See me beautiful each and every day. Could you take a chance? Could you find a way to see me shining through in everything I do, and see me beautiful? Thank you. Allison Decker.
We're back.
I always love that.
Allison Decker makes me love the cello every time I hear her.
I love that song. It's
I
like
love.
you can take a Valium or you can listen to this, watch this video.
I know it's mesmerizing. Well,
Yeah.
hello, everyone. Good to see
Hello,
you.
hello, everybody. Hello. You're gonna introduce them? Why don't you introduce your friends there?
Well, I am very excited to be able to have my friend Owen on today with his friend Sandra, who we're getting to meet. I was a leader with leadership, UNH leadership this past class, and Owen was in the class. Plus, I knew him also prior to that through Able, New Hampshire, which we've also had guests on from Able. And I just love this guy, and he's amazing and has so much to offer. Just, I want you to hear it because I just can't believe how wonderful this guy is. Right, Sandra?
Right.
Sandra?
That's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, why don't
All
you,
right, so-
Wendy, why don't you introduce Sandra too, so we know about her?
And
Well,
this is the first time I've met Sandra. So Sandra has done some volunteering with Owen from what he's told me.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think let's have
No?
Owen introduce me.
yeah, sure.
I'm
I
sorry.
can do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
That would be way
Sandra and
better.
I,
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get to it.
actually, I think the first time we met was, I think, Sandra, you worked with my dad for a little bit at the library,
Yeah, I
and
did.
then through that, I then was able to do some volunteering with a national organization called Trout Unlimited. They have a chapter um local to sort of where my parents live. I was still living with my parents at the time, and we were able to really bond through that event where we would go to different sort of locations and do stream surveys of the water quality and the diversity of organisms in there, including insects and fish.
Yep.
Was such an enjoyable experience.
How young were you when this first hit you that this was gonna be something you were gonna be interested in the rest of your life?
Well, to be honest, insects have always living in rural Sutton, New Hampshire. It I was surrounded by insects, and my family gardened a lot, so I was often on pest duty. So I got sort of interacted with them a lot, and so in a way, I've grown up with field guides. So
What do you know about insects that the average person wouldn't have a clue about? They just see them, and if they see them a lot of
oh
times, they
yeah.
just want to kill them or get rid of them. But what do you?
Oh,
What's
I've
your
saved a bunch of insects that people have like thought, oh my God, it's a giant cockroach, but it's actually not. And so, there's a number of things that people think are cockroaches, but are not.
Yeah, pine tree seed bugs, huh? They're always thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also I think it was a giant predatory water bug,
Oh,
which
yeah.
Well, that's
they
scaring me. Now
they
you're
fly
scaring
around at
me.
night.
Giant
What are you
They
bugs.
talking
fly
about?
around at night
You're not talking about
to
something
mate.
4 foot tall or something now. Because I'm getting scared
They're
here.
they're they're
Like that?
like
Okay, I can deal
yeah,
with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
yeah, no,
That's Sandra, no.
they'll fly, they migrate for like between ponds at night in the spring, and so they'll be attracted to light, and so if you leave the door open, some will come in. And so it's just like trying to get people not to squish stuff like that. I mean, I think it wasn't until college that I realized that it might be a viable study option, because I had through just basic ins accident realized that I had a lot more exposure and experience with them, just from like doing the gardening, the um plant-based stuff, and also uh working with some of the fishery sort of side of things. There's a lot of sort of overlap,
Hmm.
and I had a really good uh entomology teacher in college that uh really um made me excited for it in ways that I hadn't necessarily thought. I mean, I tend to be the person who do not get projects done early. I am not one of those people, but we had a collection. You had to collect a certain number of insects, and identify them, and then present it at the end. And I found out by accident I was literally the first person done in the class because I just kept running into them.
Yeah, and that was a big part of Owen's and my volunteering with Trout Unlimited. Is it's us and one or two biologists from Fish and Game who aren't entomologists, they're fishery biologists, and then a bunch of other volunteers. And Owen and I were really the only two we discovered who could actually tell without it being difficult, could tell a mayfly from a stonefly from, I mean, it's only to family, it isn't that hard, but
Yeah,
really we were very important, because otherwise people would have been getting all the wrong data. The other volunteers
yeah, no,
couldn't do it. And so, yeah, it was really fun and it was really great. I've done it some without Owen now, because he hasn't always been able to be available in the last years or so.
right.
But it
I'm on
was
the other side of the state.
so much easier when there were two of us who could do that. And
Yeah,
so, yeah. And that
So
too,
yeah,
that
no,
makes a big,
you guys are a good team. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No. It's that's why I'm really happy that we're gonna be able to participate in the Lebanon River student Lebanon. I can't remember the order. Um,
It's
the Lebanon Student Watershed
yeah,
Congress. I think
right.
that's the order, but
That's
it's
not
an
sure.
event where you get to teach fourth graders how to sort of do the stream surveys, and it's
Hmm.
really fun.
It is,
And I
yeah.
mean, it made me less intimidated to working with children around, because that's definitely not
Yeah.
necessarily my wheelhouse as much.
Oh, but you would never know
And
that. I mean, Owen was just really, really great. The first year that we did it, we didn't know. All they asked was for us to volunteer for this. And I knew the person who had been volunteering before us was a disabled older man, and I knew that he would just be sitting at a table. And so I assumed that that's what we would be doing. And Owen and I showed up and found out that in fact we needed chest waders, big tall boots, and that we would be taking kids in the river all day. And neither of us had any chest waders with us. So we went in just in our pants all day. And the kids, the river is full of like potholes and stuff. So you have to be careful that you don't get a fourth grader stepping up to their neck. And there's, I don't know how many kids. It's every 20 minutes, a whole nother group arrives all day. It was just crazy. And Owen, the kids were in love with him. He was so calm and so great, getting them positioned in the stream. And I think we only had 2 fall in. So we did.
Yeah, no, it was not bad.
One was on purpose, I'm sure. So actually Owen was the wonderfully calming presence in this crazy situation. Not only was there a lot of water and all that, but there were also a lot of kids whose response, it was like a theatrical response to insects, was to scream. And so we had that going on all day. Oh yeah.
Made me jump every time.
Oh.
So some of the ways that kids can reach that high pitch is just,
Yeah.
but
for the first 20 kids, it was just kind of like, oh, isn't that fun? And by the last 20 kids, we were like, oh no.
yeah.
Owen, I'm serious. I only because I write children's books myself, but I think there's a children's book here where you can say, here's this insect. Why is it important to the environment? You could, it doesn't have to be some big scholarly thing you need a PhD for. You could, because really then the kids would be more respectful of life all around them and not be just wanting to squash them.
Definitely. I think
that was Owen's message
for me,
good at these settings too, is he was very straightforward with the kids that, this isn't going to hurt you, and very calm voice.
Right.
Well, I had a tendency to go, don't worry about it,
I can see Owen doing
it's
that.
scaring the kids, right? Don't worry about it. What's wrong with you?
I mean,
Never mind.
yeah.
Oh, and that would be great with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the main thing is, just you gotta sort of like don't dumb down the information, but just make sure that you're sharing it. And I think some of my neurology helps with that. And I mean, I think that being in the field and helping kids in that way is, I think, the place that I can do that. If I'm like trying to do a lecture in front of people of that with like no props or anything like that, that would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, actually, I think the approach that we had thought we were going to do would have been actually harder for both of us. I thought we were going to sit at a table and get these kids interested, and that wasn't what we do. So yeah, it was really a great experience. And I think that it's not only the idea of a kid's book. Yeah, that'd be nice. There are kids' books about that, and none of them are really inspiring, I have to say. But another thing is the Fish and Game has a guide to the invertebrates that they hand to the kids. It's a 2-sided one sheet, and it's just a poorly mimeographed black and white pictures of.
Yeah.
They all kind of look the same, and it's really uninspiring. And I know my dream is that Owen would get employed. He gets a contract to make a new 2-sided sheet that's kind of photos, and here's this insect as immature in the stream, and here's what it looks like as an adult flying in the air. I think that would speak to the kids so much better, and that's an example of something that is just waiting to be done.
Yeah, no,
not to belabor the subject, but it's so easy to go to Amazon and they'll you can get a book on Amazon. You can do it all and get it published on Amazon, and it'll be there forever.
Right. Well, it doesn't need to be something that's available everywhere. I even You know,
Just-
this is
yeah.
gonna be New Hampshire's guide for
Yeah.
kids of what you find when
Yeah.
you turn over a rock in a stream, you know?
Yeah.
I think I know that there's a lot of people like on Instagram who there's one person I follow who does who's like a master's student for entomology and does all these posts about insects and sort of will put a lot of info on there and they do a really good job. And so I've tried to do a little bit of that with mine, but it's hard to keep up. I tend to take more photos than I'm able to sort of
Oh,
keep
yeah.
up with. I
Everybody does
mean,
that.
that's the
Yeah.
downside of the ADHD piece because that means that you like will try and take photos of everything you see, and that's
Mhm.
just not possible.
Yeah, my son he does the same thing. He takes all these photos. He's ADHD too, and then he needs to edit every single one, and then there's because he wants them all to be perfect, and then
Yeah,
But
so I've
you know,
been more discerning now, but
yeah.
still.
But I
So-
think what really for this function and for lots of things, like when we're volunteering with those volunteers on the side of a stream, you can't have Instagram, you can't have anything like that. You need this
Yeah,
physical
no.
Yeah.
pack of cards or
Yeah.
a piece of paper that you hand to them,
Right.
so they're
Okay.
in front of them. You know.
I think sharing my wonder of that sort of world and just the amazement, that's sort of what is my goal because whenever I'm doing that, because it's just when you see the world in a way that is so rich in a way that, other people may just see, oh, it's just flying insects, it's a whole mass, or something like that. Or like when you just see the forest, but you don't see the trees, that sort of analogy. I mean, it can be literal, like once you know the different species, it becomes much more colorful in a sense and exciting. And that's something that regardless of whether it's insects or other natural pieces, that's the kind of thing that I just have always wanted to share. And I've always been that way. As a kid, I went um Halloween trick-or-treating as a chambered nautilus, which is a type of cephalopod that I mean I've been that way since was a kid.
I can picture you going into a store and that would have costumes and saying, "I want a chambered nautilus costume. I'm going to go out on a
My
Halloween."
my
Somebody
dad
had to
is
make it.
It'd be
was
wonderful to
crafty
say
enough
that.
so that he was able to make it for me, but
I know
I
Owen's
didn't
dad.
go trick-or-treating that often, but you know,
Owen's
Oh,
dad.
but you know,
could you tell a little bit about, mentioned employment, just, do you mind going, just starting back with, like, what do your education, you've done so much,
yeah.
and then what are the obstacles you're finding now that you have all your degrees?
Well, yeah, no, after graduating from high school, I think especially since I am have a um invisible disability, there was a lot of assumption that I was going to go to college, and the college I chose was uh an environmental college that was a small college up in sort of rural Maine that um had all these really cool majors that was for me hard to choose which major I wanted. So um I I did really like the school, especially since they had some a pretty good supports program for classes in terms of getting accommodations for testing and all that sort of thing. Um, I I eventually I've always been interested in art as well, and so I was able to double major in art and biology, but given my disabilities, which are include ADHD, developmental dyspraxia, and a couple of others, which even the people who tested me aren't necessarily sure what exactly they know it's a other developmental disability pieces, but they haven't actually diagnosed me with
Mm.
other pieces. But uh basically
Were you
they ha-
accepted? Were you accepted when you, how were you treated by the other students?
I was I was accepted. It's been interesting. I was accepted pretty well. I think there's because it was a science school and because I was in science was a strong suit for me. My disabilities didn't necessarily show as readily. They're inconsistent in when they show up. And so I think there's a lot of people who professors who who genuinely enjoyed my company and all that, but it the trans I it was I don't think I necessarily knew enough to get much support outside of the classroom, like when it came to the sort of requirements for graduation and that sort of stuff. But I got accepted because I my grades were good and I was able to um and they uh were I seemed like the type of person that they would want to recruit because they were very much about like sort of environmental and sciences and that and I sort of fit that sort of category fairly well. Um, but they had a really nice sort of um, learning resource center in there where you had peer tutors that would help you with tests or assignments. And in that peer tutor, they had all the math teachers together having their classrooms in there. So regardless what math class you had, you could have help from any of the math teachers in it. And when anybody had like a math issue, they'd all sort of help out and like, okay, what do you need? Sort of thing. But I think
So you were pretty much
I
accepted by the other students and the teachers and no trouble there?
Yeah, I think there was definitely moments where people were like, "Oh, I didn't realize you had a disability," or moments where people would be like, where the way they'd notice would be when I would speak because my dyspraxia affects my fluency and word sort of order, and that definitely can affect how I come across. It makes it hard to listen to recordings of myself, but
Mm.
I tell you, you're very easy for me to listen to you. I find it almost soothing, you know. I don't
you
like
should
people who
hear me
talk
when
a
I'm
million
tired.
mouths. Is it better or worse? I mean, would I like you more
Worse.
worse? Would you
Oh
actually
yeah, no,
snore during a conversation?
I don't have a gradient. I go straight from from good to crap.
Well, I never noticed that on the end of the day, you were always still going strong.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
who's
I've
Yeah,
not
no, I
noticed
mean,
it.
yeah, what are you
when
talking
I'm
about
working on
here?
something that's energizing, there's the whole
Yeah,
ADHD
exciting.
hyper focus that,
Yeah.
you know, that will help me and give me energy back. But when it comes to like either being tired or stressed or overwhelmed, like I have some sensory stuff too that sensory processing makes it a little bit me slower in terms of that
So
in
Owen,
certain areas.
do you think that affects job interviews? If you get anxious at job interviews, is that a problem?
Oh yeah, I tend to try and front load everything, and so that can make things not ordered. Like I will say all these job interview um things that I have written down, but would have been questions that they would ask eventually, and I think that might have scared or unnerved people.
Yeah,
And I think also because my dyspraxia also affects my motor planning too, in terms of my coordination. And so all of that together means that I'm a non-driver at this point. Um, I've been tested for the potential, but um, that would be the equivalent of going back to school in terms of the level of commitment and energy involved. And I don't act since I don't have somebody to practice with that feasibility wise, I would not be able to hold my own job and do that at the same time, which some of those things people don't see that because they don't necessarily see, oh, just get your license. I've had a certain number of coworkers who've said that to me when I said gotten a, I don't have a license.
yeah. I think it's a big deal that in this country we're so poor
Especially
with,
the state.
yeah, and yeah,
Mm.
right. And we really assume that, and it affects not just people who have disabilities, but also people who don't have a lot of money. You know, we just assume that you can get around, and
Yeah,
that your ability to get around allows you to pick and choose among available jobs and to negotiate salary. Really, there's no way to get around for a lot of people, and they end up with jobs that aren't good enough for them, that
right.
don't demonstrate their abilities, because we don't consider them, and we don't, I mean, society as a whole would benefit, of course, so much if we didn't all have to have a car available
Right.
24/7. That it's just wrong. My son's best friend is in Austria, Vienna, and he is in his near the end of his 20s and has never bothered to learn to drive. He doesn't need to. Think of
Right.
that in the country, you know, it's just very unfortunate. I think there's ways around it. I think you could still get a good job, but
Oh,
you have to
definitely.
do the heavy lifting to make that work, you know.
And it makes employers nervous. I
Yeah,
mean, you
but in
know,
this,
like as soon as I might be having a really good interview, but like as soon as it's like you have to work weekends and the bus doesn't run on Sundays, and if they say that, then it becomes something that like they're like, oh, we don't know if that'll work because that's non-negotiable or
You're right.
something to that effect.
yeah, but you're
And
missing. Well, you guys are missing something here because my daughter came back from Sweden. She's a scientist, a nutrition scientist, and she works for Lanza, which is a worldwide company. She
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
leave. She doesn't leave her house. She there's and she was telling me, she says, Dad, there's all these jobs now. It's changing. The COVID years changed employers. And they don't want to go back to the fact that everybody has to come into the office. He said,
Yeah, but you know,
yeah,
But
we're-
with
you can
field
do it.
work,
yeah, we're
Yeah.
talking,
Yeah, that's the only,
you
Right.
gotta,
that's
yeah,
certain
Gotta be out.
sectors.
yeah.
There's really the conservation or ecology,
Mm.
or natural sciences, for lack of a better term, that sector is really very much
Yeah.
stuck in old sort of pattern, and they don't have that flexi. They're only starting to get that flexibility, and it's only going to certain sort of sections. It's not it's not throughout the industry, which is hard. I mean, literally, I talked to a state agency. I'm not going to name names because this is going on TV, but there were one agency where I was there directly talking to HR, asking about if this department would be willing to offer um, a position non-driver positions in the future, and they gave me a flat out no.
Hmm.
And that's like a whole entire department, which I think is, it's one thing if it's like certain sort of positions, but you gotta have diversity and flexibility and that sort of thing. And a lot of these jobs, you need to have sort of these basic jobs that are not really accessible or stable in order for you to traverse to get to more stable jobs.
That's very
So
true. And
is-
that is what I was going to talk about, is that there is, you know, agencies and nonprofits that are in natural resources, they're chronically underfunded. And they really are, at the same time, good people who are really driven to accomplish what they're doing. It isn't like they're selling marshmallows to people. They're doing things they really believe in. And so it gets down to them really being wanting to get the last drop out of their employees' budget. And ways they can do that is to hire a lot of temporary people, use a lot of people
Yeah.
at the bottom, and then also to get people to do a lot of things with their own money. Like my fishing game that I work for, and it's long enough now, long ago, and nobody in Alaska is going to be listening to this, I think. So I can say, my gosh, we had Army surplus vehicles was what we had. And so if you really actually wanted to get somewhere, I had to drive, it's Alaska, I had to drive 40 miles one time with a truck that the window wouldn't roll up in the middle of the winter. It was freezing cold. Anyway, so if you really wanted to be able to do anything, you used your own car, you used a lot of your own resources, and you worked a lot of overtime, always for free.
Mm.
So, agencies really are trying to eke the last dollar out of their employees. And so that's not to their advantage. It's not a good thing. And I don't think they mean to be doing that, but it happens. And so that is true for me. I was a summer employee for a few years doing crazy things. I had a master's degree and still had to start at the bottom, partly because I was a woman in a time when women didn't do this kind of work. But, that's a given. And that means that you need to be able to support yourself for a lot of the year doing something else, and it's not easy. But that doesn't mean that's the way it should be, or that it's all like that. And, Owen's already done a lot of that, proving himself part, I think. And so in a better world, and maybe even in this world, there's a place to get that step in.
I I think it's hard. I mean, with my sort of invisible disability, I think there's like a lot of sort of like what I look like in paper and what I look like outside of paper. And I think the problem is I end up getting relegated to being a professional volunteer in terms of like that's my sort of
Mhm.
job in a sense. or career in a sense, which there is very little opportunities to advance too far. And part of the issue is too that it's super competitive, like Sandy was talking about, that if you don't get a if you don't like have something that makes you stand out, like whether that's a license or a master's or even just a lot of summer uh positions before this, you are gonna always come across people who have better resumes for this because you're ha you're competing with neurotypical able-bodied people that, in order to make somewhere, some of these places, they can't just have that little slap the little um equal what is it? Equal opportunity employer logo, or encourage people with disabilities to apply. They have to actually actively recruit it, and that means making it prioritizing those people in those positions, like the way they do in tech and engineering. And in some of those areas, they're lacking in the inclusion in the S part of STEAM,
Right, they are. And I think,
science, technology, and math.
mhm. And the agency I worked with got federal money, state fish and game
Yeah.
agencies, a lot of federal money through license sales and sales of fishing and hunting equipment. And so every single report we ever wrote, we put that equal opportunity statement on the bottom of it. And
Yeah.
and I think that if you'd asked us, we would say that we would do that. We believed in that, but hiring, it gets sort of ingrained. You hire the people who look like yourself. It's just the way it is, and who have your skill set. And I know from my career, I was one of the first women to get in field biology in a state like Alaska. And I ended up with the office jobs. I mean, I had great jobs. I did statistical analysis and wrote reports, and I did field work too, but mostly took other people's data that they could not analyze themselves, and I did it for them. So the situation that had evolved was that we hired people who could back a trailer and set a net, and we accepted that they couldn't do data analysis or write papers or identify invertebrates. Actually, that too I ended up doing. We accepted that, but we would not have accepted that they couldn't back a trailer, and so that meant that we didn't recognize a whole skill set that was necessary. And it all got loaded on a few for a large area.
I hope people who are watching this video realize that we are a long way from being an enlightened society. We're so much in the dark ages in so many areas,
Right.
I mean, anybody can see your talent, Sandra, and Owen's talent is, everything else should be just superfluous. You got the talent, you got the ability.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm dependent upon the
I
person
know.
who can. I can't back a
I
trailer
know.
with a darn.
No,
And so
no, I know that. Yeah.
I mean, I could do it, but it might end up off the ramp. But I think that the recognition that there are different skill sets that are necessary, and that it would be good if we could have a group that accomplished the whole thing, and recognize that we need, because things have not changed that much. I mean, some of the people that I really had to do all that work for, and who didn't even really notice my presence, now are leading an agency, so it's just a recognition of the variety of talents that are needed, and a willingness to hire, aiming for other talents than back in the boat, you know? And so I think that, I mean, but then there's the immediate, well, so what does a person who wants to enter this field right now do, you know? And
Right.
I think that's, well, we need to get really creative in our thinking fast. I think that's
Oh
the
yeah.
Owen, do you,
I've definitely had to take the quote unquote scenic route. Like I know that there's plenty of people in sort of like who graduated similar time frame for me that are already sort of probably have their P definitely have their masters, probably have their PhD.
Mhm.
And so, you know, it's difficult. I mean, it was difficult for me when I went to college. I took 5.5 years to graduate, and even then, even then, um, the half of the year was because I needed to do my internship outside of the actual college time frame. So I had to literally, and in order for that, I literally had to create my own internship. Essentially, it was a glorified volunteer position at Dartmouth College, their life science greenhouse, the one with the corpse flower. Um, uh, that that one, oh, they were amazing people to work with, and I just really loved working with them, and they were able to help me with finding a ride share to in order to do that, which I paid like $10 in order to go back and forth, which worked out really well, and I got to bond with those people as well, and it was really nice in that sense. But when it came time, they did want to hire me, but they couldn't because there were no positions available. And once a position showed up, I did get interviewed and went through all the rigmarole, but they ended up having to pass on me because it wasn't just them that were hiring, it was also like the department heads and all that stuff. And so there were people who were more experienced and had more qualifications in that stuff sense, even though this was a entry level position. And so there's situations like that where um I've had to be creative, and that has meant that my experience hasn't matched the standard cookie cutter approach. And doing job applications is very exhausting for me and takes a lot of effort. So I am not one of those people that can whip out an application or multiple applications, like do 5 or more applications a week or something like that, which I know there's people who do 10, but I I can barely do 2 sometimes. And part of that is my disabilities make that a little slower, but also because I mean I'll be honest, it can get very demoralizing when you have the same sort of responses over and over, and realizing that this isn't necessarily going to change, and that's even necessary. And
But
that's
Owen,
even if you're looking at internships.
Owen, listen to me. This kind of reminds me of where we were as a country, uh, during civil rights, where, people of color couldn't get hired, or things like, it's just the same thing. It's like, it's just the same prejudice, but it's wearing different clothes, and
Yeah,
it pretends it's not the same. It's no different from the racism of the past. It's in the
and
same
and
category. They've judged you
and this
before after 2
overlap,
minutes of knowing you, and you can't know anybody in 2 minutes.
right?
Yes.
And
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 keep this tape and use this tape in the future. Use this
yeah,
tape. Let them see you.
yeah.
I mean, this will save you a lot of time. This is who I am, you know?
I think for me, it's like I can have people who I get the two extremes because it's an invisible disability.
Yeah.
I get people who see me as an amazing person that, you know, they don't necessarily see the effort and they don't necessarily see me as disabled or anything like that. But or they don't see the struggle. And then there are those who uh don't see me outside of the disability, and they will underestimate me. And so it's been a challenge to have people see both, and I've definitely had to bushwhack for a lot for in terms of trailblazing my path. It's been exhausting, and I've definitely been looking. I'm still looking for any mentors I can have. Sandy's been a very good one so far.
Well, yeah, no, and I think what you need to be able to get is people who see you as a scientist, and they don't care about the rest.
Yeah,
You know,
and
that's,
and
you know, I described problems, but there's also really great things that can happen. I mean, I know that the agency I work for was really supportive of people. They really, all of us, many times went way out of our way to be supportive of people who had problems. And we
yeah,
had one of my coworkers he had a neurodegenerative disease, and he worked in the field to begin with. He was a field worker, and in the end, he worked. We accommodated his disability all the way through, and that we all did that. We all really felt that that was
yeah,
important, and I think that it isn't so much that in this particular way. I don't think it's so much prejudice in those terms, it's lack of imagination. I think that
yeah,
people, like I say, we have an image, we all do, of what a fishery biologist looks like, and so it's hard to see outside that box, even if we mean
yeah,
to. And so I think that it's a matter of convincing people to look at it differently, and to make them aware of other talents that they actually need. I mean, I have read
yeah,
reports produced by some agencies that are so bad you think, oh my gosh, who wrote this? And that's because they didn't realize they need to hire somebody who's
yeah,
good at public communication. Communicating
yeah,
scientific data is, I mean, there's the communication of, oh, isn't this an interesting thing about octopuses?
yeah,
But then there's also the communication of, here's this hard science that we know, and this hard science needs to be understood by those who control budgets so that we can do the right thing. And so good scientific papers are also really important. And boy, I see that not being done as rigorously as it was in the past, and that concerns me. And the public's appetite for real science is less and less. And so, anyway, I think that it takes some forward thinking and some understanding of what needs to happen for an agency to thrive. And that means you look a little further afield when you're looking for your employees.
I just
I
can't.
think creativity is the most important thing that they and not just as sort of like um uh inter not sort of the science, not just for like the supervisors and the bosses, but from like the HR departments that, like, there's a lot of it where I was getting a lot of roadblocks from HR more so than um the actual people who I would be interviewing with which who would be uh uh who would be interested and supportive, and some even offered to give me tips on how to get to go forward in the industry and stuff
So
like
Owen,
that. So
just real quick, when you're saying you have blocks or you've seen the blocks from HR, now, not, I don't know if that's a surprise to me, but HR, I mean, it's supposed to be all inclusive and the seems like companies are working very hard to make sure that that is done. So how would you, have anybody told you how to maybe get around that so that you can get to those field people or those people that want to work with you? What are the obstacles that they're throwing at you?
well, it's a policy thing. So like there's a lot of policies in like specifically certain state agencies like Fish and Game or other ones
Oh, we're
will
getting out of
have
time.
requirements that require you to have a driver's license to
Oh,
work
okay, so
in that department, and they will not even look at any sort of applications that do not do that. So they're the ones weeding out everything else.
so
So your
transportation
application will
is
not even
huge.
get submitted.
I gotta say, that is really bad. You know,
It is.
I mean,
Well, that's
It's
why I'm
awful.
asking.
It's really awful.
yeah,
And
our,
Yeah. So
transportation for you is a huge, huge roadblock.
Yeah.
No
yeah.
pun there, but yes, right?
I mean, well, maybe, you know, I
Um,
lived in a state where there were a lot of people who came in from villages and places that really driving, what were you gonna do with a car in some of those places? So maybe that's
Yeah,
why that was just
yeah.
not even a
Now, New
consideration.
Hampshire is, we've, legislatively been working on trying to make better transportation accessible for the state. It
Yeah.
is, it's a huge issue.
I want to thank you
Yeah. Thank you.
for spilling out your guts here.
Really, yeah.
A lot
Not
of
the
stuff.
easiest thing to do.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Feel
Yeah.
like there's so much more to talk about, but
Yeah, we could go on.
understandable.
We can come back.
You
Come
should
back when
come
you
back.
come back and tell us a
Yeah,
happy
no.
story, like you're the head of some big technological company.
Yeah.
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 And
No,
you know what?
you're welcome to come back. We've got, our
Yeah.
next season.
If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. As we travel through this life, there is trouble, there is strife, and some days seem dreary and so long. But with courage on our side, there's no need to run and hide. We can lift our wings and learn to fly. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. Now today may not seem bright, 'cause we cannot see the light, and there's thick black darkness all around. We can soar up to the clouds and ignore the angry crowds. We must lift our wings and learn to fly. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, If you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. And if fates will be our friend, there'll be peace around the bend. No more tears for us to cry. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you.